Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Beginner's Guide to Being in Charge. My name is Courtney Brown, and I'm the Southeast Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be your host and question moderator today. Our presenter this morning is Suzanne Macaulay, Deputy Director for the Pioneer Library System in New York State. Just a couple of announcements. To register for other webinars or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. For a full list of our current in-person training menu, please see our continuing education website. This session is about an hour, so you'll receive one LEU for this presentation. If you're watching an archived recording of this webinar, instructions on how to obtain your LEU are in the video's description on YouTube. Or you can also find those instructions on the ISL's continuing education site under LEU policies. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Suzanne.
All right, thank you so much for having me today. So this is the Beginner's Guide to Being in Charge. You don't have to be a beginner to be here, but it is geared towards beginners. But maybe if you have a little bit more experience in leadership roles, I'll say something that's very affirming to you, and that could always help as well. So just a little bit about who I am. So I am the program director at the OWWL Library System. I was the deputy director of the Pioneer Library System, but we got a name change because it was a little confusing. We were the Pioneer Library System, but we serve the OWWL libraries. So we recently amended our charter. So we're now the OWWL Library System, and like everything that changed during COVID, so did my roles and responsibilities here at the system. So I went from deputy director to program director. And that just means I do coordinated outreach, youth services consultant to our member libraries, state aid for library construction, continuing education for our member library staff, social media and communication, and I buy all the donuts for all of our events. So that pretty much falls under everything that I do, and program director summed that up a little bit better. So we had a name change and I had a title change, but it's the same system as it was before. And just so a little reference where we're located, we are in Canandaigua, New York. So if you think of the whole, there's the map of New York. We are up in the top. We're situated between Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo. So we serve 42 libraries across 2,500 square miles. Most of our libraries fall into the small and rural category. We have 2 out of 42 that probably would not, but the rest serve. Our smallest library serves 450 people. Our largest 2 libraries serve just over 25,000, but everybody else serves like in that 2,000 to 8,000 range. So when I come up with these presentations, a lot of times it's geared towards the staff that I work with at those libraries and those directors. So depending on where you are in your library, you may have to scale up or scale down a little bit, but that's kind of like who I always like structure these for, my member libraries in Ontario, Wayne, Wyoming, and Livingston counties. So let's see, we're going to jump right in. So congratulations, you are a new director, manager, supervisor, leader, department head, whatever that title may be. But now what? So sometimes you're given this title and it's great and I accept this promotion, and then you sit down and it's like this moment of like, what have I done? And people will ask me, what's it like being a library director? I'm not a library director anymore. I was a library director for a long time and now I work at the system, and I do get to help a lot of the new library directors. And this was a picture of when I was trying to do our annual report to the state several years ago. And I answer, like, being a director could be a lot of fun. You get to do great stuff like this, and your staff can be like really nice to you sometimes. And then also it can feel like this. And I think that I've had a lot of experience as a director, but I'm not so far removed from being a new leader that I I haven't forgotten these moments, like these moments where you're like all alone and you feel stranded and you just don't have the answer. So this presentation is kind of like the lessons I learned and the lessons I'm still learning, and I've kind of curated them all together. So hopefully I can help other people that are still learning these lessons along with me. Like there are good moments and there are happy moments, and you will find the answers, and it doesn't have to be so overwhelming all the time when you are a new leader. So I think the number one thing I always like to tell people is you deserve your position. Sometimes, and we'll talk a tiny bit about imposter syndrome, but sometimes people are like, oh, I just got this because I was lucky, or there was no one else that applied, or other people will make you feel that way. Well, you were an internal appointment, and I don't care how you got your position, whether you beat out 50 people, whether you were the only one, whether you had to go through 10 interviews, whether the board knocked on your door and said, come lead our library. However you got there, you deserve to be there. Like, our paths are all different, but now you're in this leadership role and you own it, you deserve to be there. So don't make yourself feel like you don't, and don't let others make you feel like you don't. And imposter syndrome, there's a lot out there, so I'm only going to touch on it in like 3 or 4 slides, because there's a lot of other webinars, there's books. I do think that it exists. I think everybody experiences it at some point in your career, and there's moments where I still experience it, but it's normal, it's okay. And it's when you feel like I only got here because of luck, not because you're talented or you're qualified, but that's not true. But knowing that everyone feels this way sometimes makes me feel a little bit better when I have those moments. So it's really common. It's normal to have these feelings, especially when you're starting a new job or a position. So even if you've been a director before and you move to a different library and you've had those feelings, that's totally normal. You're in a whole new environment. It's a new building. It's a new staff. It's a new board. It's a new community. There's a lot to learn. So these feelings may come up over and over again in your career, and that's totally okay. So I don't know if there's any Ted Lasso fans out there, but when I saw this clip on Ted Lasso, I was like, yes, this is how I feel sometimes, especially in my position now. And every time I write a program proposal, I feel pretty confident that my boss is going to like it. There's going to be some tweaks. But in the beginning, I would submit it to him and I would hide, because I felt this: you won't like my idea and it will make you hate me. Then you'll fire me. Then I have to move back in with my parents and they'll be ashamed of me. Then everyone finds out back home and laughs at me until my face melts off. Like, we've all had these moments. And again, it's totally okay. It's totally normal. It's just important that we don't get stuck in these moments. So in New York State, when there's 23 library systems, and every library system has to have 4 MLS degreed people on staff. And so when I was being hired, we only had 3, and I was going to be the 4th. And there are times where I'll say to my boss, did you just hire me because it was easier than filing a variance for not having the 4th? And, and at first he would be like, no, no, no. Now he rolls his eyes, because it's been over 2 years. It's like, stop asking that question. But we just still have those moments of self-doubt, and that's okay. And I love this quote, and this is kind of my last point on imposter syndrome. It turns out it's not having doubts that's the problem, it's believing them. And this is from an Olympic athlete. Like, this is someone who's like at the top of her sport, and she still has these moments. And if you find that you're having these moments of self-doubt, whether you label it imposter syndrome or not, there's a couple things that I like to do to help combat that. One thing is, I don't know if you could see behind me, like how small my little screen is, but I have a bulletin board behind me. Anytime someone sends me a thank you note or a funny note in delivery, like if libraries are sending stuff to the system and someone writes me a little funny note, anytime there's something cheerful that somebody sent me, I always hang it up on the bulletin board, because it's a really nice reminder, especially on those bad days. Like, my work matters and what I do matters, and I matter to people. And I love having these little notes of cheer behind me. The other thing I do is I keep a Google Doc of like all of our successes that we do here at the system, and things that I was involved in, because not only does this help at the end of the year when I have to sit down with my boss and do my evaluation, but I can always pop open that Google Doc and be like, look at all the great stuff that we're doing. Look at all that we have accomplished. We went to a food pantry last week and handed out 427 books. Like, this bad day or this bad moment doesn't mean anything. So those are 2 things that I like to do to help combat those moments of I don't deserve to be here, or I'm not doing a good job, or I don't know what I'm doing. So I would recommend trying one or both of those. I know one of the children's librarians in our system, she keeps, I forgot what she calls it, but it's like a like oh, it's a smile file. And it's the same thing as my bulletin board, but she keeps it in a folder. And anytime she gets like a card or a note or a drawing, she puts it in her smile file, and she'll pull it out and she'll go through it when maybe she's having not a great day. So I just think it's important to create those little things that you can refer back to get those positive affirmations. The other thing is you deserve to be adequately compensated for your position. And I think this is really important. When you go in to negotiate for a salary, or if you have that opportunity, I know not every library or library system is structured that way, but make sure you ask for what is appropriate for you to be paid. So do your research, demonstrate your value, and don't be afraid. And this is something, it's one of those things that I am definitely still working on. So there were 2 instances that I always recall. And the first was when I was interviewing for my very first director job when I lived in Pennsylvania. And I went in and it was great. And then at the end of the interview, the board president said, and this is the salary, is that okay with you? And I did like this weird like jazz hand thing. And I was like, I'm not in it for the money. And then like the next day they called me and offered me the job. And I was like, oh, it's because I was so great. My husband's like, or maybe you were like, I'll work for good vibes. Like, I shouldn't really have done that. But it was like a lesson learned. And I was really, I was much younger at the time. And then not so long ago, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, I was interviewing for a director job and I got the job offer and they said, okay, you're going to come in and meet with our board president. We're going to do a salary negotiation. And I had done a lot of research. So I took my advice, do your research. And I looked at not only the county that I was interviewing in, but I looked at the other 4 counties. So I did 5 counties worth of research and I looked at libraries that were the same size as this one, as like population, budget, programming numbers, door counts. I looked at everything and I came up with a number that I thought was very, very fair. And I went in and I sat down and immediately dropped that number by $4,000. And I wasn't even prompted to do that. Like I just did it because I don't know. I was afraid. I was afraid they would take back the job offer. I'm not really sure. And I kind of got into that. Well, I should just be happy to be here. And that really wasn't fair to myself. It wasn't fair to my qualifications. What I was asking for was absolutely justified, but I kind of like walked back on that even before like they said anything to me. So that was a really good lesson learned. And someone at the time said, well, if you were a male, you never would have done that. And that's a whole other thing to unpack as far as leadership goes. But when you're going in, do your research, demonstrate your value, and don't be afraid. And demonstrating your value is really important. It doesn't mean going in and saying, well, if I take this job, my commute's much longer and gas is really expensive. That doesn't really mean anything to a board. Or saying something like, I have childcare is really expensive. Like that's not bringing value. That's very true, but that's not bringing value to their organization. So by demonstrating your value, you're going to want to say, at my previous library, I increased summer reading participation 45%. Like you want to give like what that value to their organization is and what you are going to bring. So when you ask for your number, they can see what you're going to do for them. Okay, don't go it alone. I think this is another thing that's really important. I remember sitting at a director meeting several years ago, and our system director at the time, who has since moved on to the state library, she was saying to all of us, being a director can feel really lonely. And at that moment, I didn't understand that that's what I was feeling until she said it. And I was like, yes, I feel really lonely, because when you're a director, you really don't have like, if sometimes you want to vent, you want to get some things off your chest, but you can't go do that to the staff and you can't go do that to the board. You're sort of like a little bit on this island. So I think it's really important that you find some sort of group or people that you can go to when you need to talk. And sometimes it's just to get things off your chest, but sometimes it's about some more serious issues. And for me, that falls into 5 different categories. That's your mentors, advisors, allies, network, and sponsors. And I'll go over each of those. And this may look a little bit different for everyone, but this is how I've sort of categorized these people in my life. So mentors will share existing knowledge, skills, and experience. So these pictures are from when I first started out as a children's librarian, and the director, well, she was the assistant director, now the director, Mamie Eng. She's the one in the second picture that's next to me in the burgundy dress. And she, she hired me, she gave me my first job in libraries, and she really, I think, set me up for success. I don't think I'd be where I am in my career now if it were not for her. She would take me out to dinner once a month. Thursday night was my late night at the library. We'd go out to dinner. She was always like taking time to sit and talk to me, not just about my role as a children's librarian, but just about everything in libraries. And she shared so much with me. Forever, I would go back and ask her questions. To this day, she still sends my kids Christmas presents. So now I would say she's more of a friend than a mentor, but there's definitely times that I'll still reach out to her, maybe with questions about civil service. And I always, go back to her. And she has always been a mentor to me in my career. I think mentor relationships, there's a lot of emphasis placed on them, like you need a mentor, you need a mentor. And those, I think, are a little bit more difficult sometimes. I think because they kind of develop organically, whether it's a first boss who's a really good boss, or maybe it's, a professor at college, or, but you can't really go up to somebody and be like, want to be my mentor? It's very awkward. So I think sometimes these relationships just sort of develop. And if they don't develop for you, that's okay. I think there's those other categories I'm going to talk about where there are people for you that will support you. But if you do have that mentor relationship, or later on when you get a lot of experience and you have the opportunity to maybe mentor someone else, it can be really invaluable. So advisors, these are the ones that are going to offer specific advice about specific questions. So these relationships are typically less fun. This is going to be, your HR person, lawyer, like when something happens, labor law dispute, or, there's maybe some issues between staff members. These are the people that you're going to go to. So they're the Tobys. It's not really a fun relationship, but you definitely need to have these people somewhere in your lineup. When something happens, you have to have somebody like this to turn to. There are issues as a director that you cannot handle on your own. You should not handle on your own, and it's okay not to handle on your own. So if you don't have some sort of a lineup in place, like here we have HR works people can refer to. Some of our libraries have a lawyer on retainer. Some of them we have someone that we can refer libraries to, especially those smaller libraries, but always have like these kind of people around that you can go to when something a little bit higher up. If it's something that makes you make that like cringe face emoji, this is where you need to turn to an advisor. So your allies. Allies are the ones that make sure colleagues are heard, included, supported, and encouraged. So these are like your cheerleaders. They're going to listen to you. They're going to make sure that you're in the room. They're going to invite you to the meeting. For me, that's my current boss. He is just phenomenal. But I wouldn't really, there are times where he does fall in a mentorship role, but our jobs are very, very different. So I would say he's more of an ally. I facilitate a women in leadership program in our system, and that the program was his idea. I was talking about, some issue related to women and libraries in the workplace. And in our strategic plan at the time, it said that we were going to develop a leadership program. And he was like, oh, that's it. Our leadership program should be women in leadership program. Like, you should do this. And then he's also somebody, he's our executive director. He's very busy, but he will come to food pantries and hand out books with me. He'll do all these outreach events. If I'm going on a construction aid call, he'll hop on the call with me. When we went on a field trip to the Women's History Museum in Seneca Falls, he came with us. Like, he's always willing to like roll up his sleeves and do the work with us to support us. And even if he can't, he always makes, like, it can't physically be there, he always makes sure that we're heard, included. He makes time to sit down and have weekly meetings with us, even though we're in and out of his office all the time anyway. And it's just a really good relationship. And I think, and it doesn't have to be a boss that does that. It can be like any kind of colleague, but just making sure, like, let's like support each other, let's hear each other, let's include each other, let's encourage each other. And I think that's a great relationship to develop with your colleagues. Sponsor. So this is the person who will advocate for you even when you are not in the room, but when you are in the room as well. And I always refer back to the Mighty Ducks with this one. But at the end, when they had to take the penalty shot so they could win, and everyone was like, oh, Banks is going to take it. Banks is going to take it. And Coach Bombay was like, no, it's going to be Charlie. And everyone's like, no, Charlie sucks. But he's like, no, it's Charlie. Like, he was Charlie's sponsor, and Charlie took the penalty shot and the Mighty Ducks won. And having someone in your life, in your career, that's going to be like, no, it's Charlie. No, it's that person. And it doesn't have to be as extreme as this example, but that's really important. And this could even be the person who's going to nominate you for an award, or if there's a new committee forming, the person's like, who would be really good in that? Sarah would be awesome on that committee. So it's the person that's going to advocate for you, whether you're there or whether you're not there, and they're always going to have your best interests in their minds. It's not a person who's going to hoard everything for themselves. So sponsors are really important. And as a director or department head, you should definitely be sponsoring those people that are underneath you.
Suzanne, we had a really great question come up in the chat. Someone asked, can these people overlap? Like, can my ally be my sponsor as well? I work in a small system.
Yeah, I definitely think they do. Like, it's almost like, it's like a Venn diagram with lots of circles, and some are going to be touching, some are going to be overlapping. Like I said, my boss, there's times where he does take more of a mentorship role, especially like with construction aid. That's something that I took over from him. He's constantly like walking me through it and teaching me that. But then like there's times where he's an ally, and he's like, I'm going to support you, I'm going to encourage you, I'm going to show up to this event, I'm going to do it alongside you. Then there's the times where I would say he's a sponsor. Last spring I was fortunate enough to be named an outstanding librarian in New York State, and he's the one that nominated me for that award. So like, I definitely think one person can like shift, no one's going to fall neatly into these categories. They might, especially with those advisors, like the lawyer is going to be the lawyer. But other people, depending on the situation, can kind of shift into different roles for you, especially when you're in small libraries, right? There's not a lot of resources or a lot of people to go around. But, and that's why I say, if you don't have a mentor, that's okay, because you might have an ally that kind of shifts maybe more into a mentorship role. Maybe they've been a director a few more years than you, and they've experienced some things that you haven't, and they give you some really good professional guidance. So yeah, for sure, definitely. No one has to fall into neat categories. All right, network. And these are your peers that provide emotional and practical help. So this is the Women in Leadership program that I mentioned. So this is a little bit more of a formal group. We meet every other month. We're meeting hybridly. We started meeting just online, but as we felt more comfortable gathering again in person, we do hybrid, so you can see some people are on screen, some people in person. And this is when, in the middle, our new Annalee Dragon, the new executive director of the New York Library Association, came and spoke with our group. And this is a really great program. I'm very glad I started it. It's really nice sometimes to just sit with people. We oftentimes our meetings will center around a book, but it's nice. And then we'll talk about the book, and then we talk about other things, but it's really nice. We don't solve all the problems, but it's nice to be like, you feel that way, I feel that way too, like to kind of have that. And sometimes just sharing that and knowing that other people have that emotion or have that doubt or have faced that opportunity or have had that success, it's really fulfilling, it's affirming, it's really nice to know, again, you're not alone. And then sometimes we are able to offer advice to each other, like, oh, this is how I handled it. And then someone's like, that's great, I'm going to try that when I go back to my library. So like I said, this is more of a structured support network. They all don't have to be structured. You could just say to a bunch of people, like, want to go out and get coffee once a month. And it doesn't even have to be a group of librarians. Like, it could be like a teacher and a lawyer and the person across the street, and you just kind of get together and talk, and you just provide emotional and practical help. Sometimes including people outside librarianship, they have a really different perspective that may be really helpful. A lot of the professional development books I read are completely outside libraries. Like, I feel like I learn a lot from reading books about retail and restaurants and like that customer service aspect. And then there's groups that are more formal than this. Like in our area, we have like the Rochester Business women's network and stuff like that. So, but this kind of falls into the middle, but try to form a network. If a network is not available to you, create one and just reach out to a couple of colleagues and just say, hey, would you want to go out for coffee once a month? Or if there's a director meeting coming up, maybe there's one or two you want to go out to lunch after with. So sometimes these network opportunities present themselves to us and sometimes we have to create them. And I know a lot of times it's like very vulnerable putting yourself out there like, hey, would you want to go get together? But believe me, people feel the same way and they will be happy for the invitation. They will be happy to have that little bit of a relaxed forum where you can kind of share your feelings and things that are going on at work. So I really, why I'm not like, you know, if you don't have a mentor, that's okay. If you can form a network, that's great. It doesn't even have to be a big network. It could be as many people as this. It could be 2 people. It could be 1 person, but just somebody that you can have those shared experiences with and conversations with is really helpful. I have found this group to be tremendous over the past 18 months. And we're coming up on 18 months. And then, you know, we're going to like start over with a whole new cohort, you know, in the new year. So it's been really a really rewarding experience. So use your seat at the table. Now that you have a seat at the table, you're a director, supervisor, department head, make sure you're using it. You're not just like there taking up space. And that means come prepared, be curious, be confident. You are the authority on your organization. So coming prepared. If you are going to a meeting and you don't get an agenda, feel free to ask for an agenda. If there's not a formal agenda, be like, what are we going to be talking about? Just in case there is something I need to bring. It's okay to ask. Don't just be like, oh, well, I didn't get anything. So, you know, make sure you are prepared for every meeting that you go to. Be curious, ask questions. And those could, you know, and they don't have to be confrontational questions. You can be like, that sounds really interesting. Can you tell me more about that? And people love to talk about themselves. So if you ask questions, they're like, oh, great, yay. And then it's kind of memorable that you were at that meeting. And it's a great way to build some relationship equity and be confident. So if you're going out and you're meeting with, like here, a lot of our directors are part of Rotary. So you're meeting with all these like business leaders from around the area, be confident because only you know about the library. Everybody there knows nothing about the library. You're the authority in your organization and go in there with that confidence. Don't be like, oh, well, these are, you know, this big, you know, lawyer and this big business owner and this big accountant. Like you are the big library director or, you know, leader of that organization. Go in there and own that authority. So when you have to go to these meetings, and I always get a little bit nervous walking into these sorts of rooms that are outside of my library or outside of my system or outside the people I know, practice out loud. If you have to say something, say they want you to talk 5 minutes about new library services, practice that out loud. I know it seems silly, but it definitely helps you feel more comfortable when you have to finally get up and speak. And then when there's conversation going around at the table, create space to speak. So if you have something to say and you're not getting that opportunity, especially maybe if you're newer to the group, you can interject with like, they say the yes plus furthermore method. You can be like, yeah, that's a great point. Plus I was thinking, and that's how you sort of interject. So it's not like rude, you're interrupting, you're affirming what's being said, but then you're able to kind of get your point in a little bit. And don't use clarifying language. This is something I work on every single day and probably will work on every single day of my entire career. And these are all examples of clarifying language. You are going to get the slides, so you're going to be able to see all this. But, you know, it's stuff like just reaching out, just thinking out loud here. I'm no expert at this, and it's like this thing that we do to sort of soften our language so we don't seem so like aggressive, especially women in leadership roles. We're like, we don't want people to think we're aggressive or abrasive or, you know, and so you sort of put these softeners in, but it undercuts your authority. Like you're the expert at the library and saying, I'm no expert at this, but it really undercuts your expertise, your skills, what you're bringing to the table. But even in emails, I go through my emails every single time I type an email, I read it and I remove every single time I use the word just. I use the word just in all of my emails. I'm just checking in. I just wanted to know. No. I need to be like, I am checking in. I would like to know, like, stop removing just, like, it's just nothing. And I do think that this is a work in progress, but definitely keep working at it. You should never be apologizing for asking for information or clarifications or for sending an email. And I just think it's really important that we look at this list, that we study this list, and we work hard at removing this clarifying language from our conversations and our email communications. Oh, another Ted Lasso for using your seat at the table. And I love this clip too. And, and they were like, how do you go into these rooms full of men? And how do you talk, how do you go out in there and you're so strong and you talk to them? And, she said, I stand up on my tippy toes and I put my arms up in the air and I make myself as big as possible. And then she makes like this noise like this, like, ah. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that in a hallway before a meeting, but you can like mentally do like this, like, ha, and like make yourself really big. And remember, like, I'm the authority on my library. I'm the expert in my library, and I'm going to be big and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to use my seat. But I love this clip so much. And if you aren't watching Ted Lasso yet, watch Ted Lasso. All right. Now that you're using your seat at the table, it's really important that you bring others to the table. And what does this look like in your library? This could be inviting a new director to a meeting with a community partner. So when I started at the Clifton Springs Library, we share, it's really weird how it's structured, but we share a service area with the Phelps Library, like we share the school districts. And the Phelps Library Director at the time, she would get a lot of donations from like Rotary and groups like that. But instead of like kind of hoarding those resources, when I was new, she brought me to all those meetings. She introduced me to everyone. And I think that's really important. She helped me like get involved with the community. So that could be you inviting a new director to a meeting with a community partner. If you have an assistant director or another staff member, you can bring them to an administrative meeting. At our last directors meeting, somebody brought her new assistant director, and it's really important, I think, that they get to experience that and be part of that, those higher level conversations sometimes. You can invite a staff member to present at a board meeting, especially if it's summer reading. So it's September, October, your board's meeting, and you're going to talk about summer reading and provide some statistics and a recap. Have your youth services person come and maybe they can present. And if they're not comfortable yet, maybe talking to the board, you present that information, but they're sitting right there and they get to hear all the wonderful things that you're saying about them. I know we go into our board meetings and we talk about our staff and like, our staff is great, but our staff isn't there. And they don't know that we're doing that and we're advocating for them and we're supporting them and we're sponsoring them. So having somebody there that you're going to be talking about could be tremendous. And then maybe next year they have the confidence then to present their summer reading statistics to the board. So I think that's a really great opportunity to really boost your staff up, inviting them to a board meeting, especially to talk about some programs or statistics that relate to their department. Encourage your staff to submit a conference program proposal. You could be like, that was a really great service or a really great program you started. You should submit that to our state conference this year. Somebody did that for me many years ago, and I was like, no. And now I present all the time. I'm not the smoothest at it, but I do it all the time. And that was really a game changer for me. If that person had not said that to me, maybe I wouldn't have. Maybe I would have been like, what do I have to bring? How could I speak to a group of people? So definitely encourage those people to submit program proposals. Recommend your staff for committee appointments or similar recognition. Again, you don't have to hoard all the committees. If there's somebody that would be better on that committee than you, recommend them. And then support professional development and continuing education opportunities. I tell our directors all the time, if it is a youth services workshop, send your youth services person, no matter how interesting it sounds. Even if you're like, oh, I really wanted to see that author, send your youth services person. Don't hoard all of those opportunities either. So, and it's like that scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset. This is like an updated version of like that Drake meme. And I thought it was like cuter and funnier. And sometimes the Drake meme's like a little, some people say it's problematic. So, or he is. So I use this one instead, but it doesn't have to be like, I have the seat at the table. I can be the only one at the table. like you're like, I have a seat at the table now and I'm pulling up all these chairs for everybody else. And I think that's really important. It could be you're pulling up chairs for colleagues. It could be people that work under you, like giving people a space to be at that table too and share and support them. I think that's really important. So use your seat at the table and bring others to the table with you. That doesn't mean giving up your seat. It just means you need more chairs. Okay. Not everyone will like you and everything that you do, and that is okay. And this is something that I have experienced. I'm like, sometimes I joke like I'm not for everyone, and I'm not. But I think it's really important to know that if you serve a population of 10,000 people are not going to like you. And, I'm from Long Island, which is downstate New York, and I act all tough sometimes. And I'm like, I don't care if people like me. I don't care at all, like whatever. But you know what? In the realities, I care very, very much. And even though I know I'm not for everyone, when someone doesn't like me, I'm like, why? Why don't they like me? And when I worked at one of the libraries, there were probably 4 community members that did not like me. And they were a little vocal about it, but they did not like me. And the reasons were things like, they didn't like my book sale sign, and I didn't play cards with them on Friday afternoon. There was a group of euchre players that would meet, and I didn't sit and play with them. I was really busy. It was a brand new library to me. I had a lot of work to do. And also I don't understand euchre. I've tried, but I just don't get it. So I didn't sit with them. And they didn't like me. And I fixated on this group of people that did not like me so much. So all I could think about, why don't they like me? Why don't they like me? And then that became well, everybody in the community doesn't like me. I really built it up in my mind. And these 4 people became a roadblock to me being happy at this library. But I was forgetting about the woman who I helped to renew her license on the DMV website, which is super confusing in New York State. And, she can finally drive again. She jumps up and she hugs me, and I'm not a hugger, but I let her hug me anyway. And then I had these 2 sisters that would come to my office every day after school, and they would do their homework at the other side of my desk. And then we'd pick Candyland and have juice boxes. I would forget about all those wonderful interactions, and I would fixate on these 4 people. And it really wasn't very healthy. And I think I learned a lot from that. And not everyone is going to like you. Don't let that stop you from enjoying your job, enjoying those special moments, appreciating all that you are doing for your community, for your staff, for your library. So you have that, and that goes back to me, maybe keeping that bulletin board or keeping that smile file so you can refer back to all the good that you are doing, because it's really hard not to let those 1 or 2 detractors get to you. And that's why I love this quote: do what you feel in your heart to be right, for you'll be criticized anyway. You cannot make all of the people happy all of the time. And it is impossible. Like I said, if you serve a population of 10,000, it is impossible that 10,000 people are going to love every single thing that you do. As long as you are operating from your heart and you're trying to do the very best you can for your community and your staff and your library, then you are fine. Oh, and you don't have to be everything to everyone all the time. So this is really similar, but this is more about setting boundaries. So it is okay to say no. It is okay to say, I don't know. You have to delegate. That is something I'm terrible at. Set a sustainable workflow, set your boundaries, and take your PTO. We're going to just run through all these real quick. But it is okay to say no. You can say no. And that might not be a hard no, but that might be not right now. I need more time. Can we do this in 6 months? I'm going to need more information. Can we form a team to do this? So you don't have to be no, slam the door. But you can be honest and say, right now is not good. Can we revisit this in 3 to 6 months? Or what if we did it this way? So, you can say no. You don't have to take everything on. And it's okay to say, I don't know. You don't have to have all the answers. And that goes back a little bit to that imposter syndrome thing. If you say, I don't know, you're like, well, I'm clearly unqualified for this job and now everyone knows it. No, you are not required to know everything there is to know, especially think back over the past 2 years. Everything that's been thrown at us, everything that's changed, you can't possibly know everything. Sometimes it feels like things change by the minute. So you can say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out for you, and then find out, right? Make sure you follow up, but you could say, I'm going to get that information for you. And that could be to patrons, that could be to staff, that could even be to board members. You're like, I'm going to look into that and I will report back to you. But it is okay to say you don't know, but then take those next steps to get that information for people and follow up. But definitely don't make something up. That's like the worst thing you can do, because people will find out and call you out on it. Make sure you delegate. I am terrible at delegating. Well, right now there's nobody that works under me. We're like a flat org here, but back when I was a library director, even when I was a children's librarian way back, I had 2 pages. I am terrible at delegating. So I would be trying to do all these things. Like as a director, I'm like doing the board report, and I'm like, trying to purchase new materials. And then I'm cutting up little things for story time. And I look out of my office at the circulation desk, and I have 2 clerks just sitting there reading magazines. And I'm like, well, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to ask them to do this. Meanwhile, they probably would have been like, thank you. Yes, something to do, because I am very bored sitting here for 4 hours. You can delegate. It is okay. Like, you have to at some point let something go. Asking somebody who works at the library to do something is not mean. And I would sometimes say, I don't want to ask them, I feel bad. No, ask them. That's what they're there for. That's what you're paying them for. They're not here to read magazines. They don't want to be here to read magazines. Definitely delegate. And some of it is like, I feel bad asking, and some of it is like giving up that control. But you can't do everything. You have to let some people, and it might not be done in the exact same way you like it. That's okay, because at the end of the day, the task gets done. So learning how to delegate, and again, if I ever have someone under me, I will have to work on this forever and ever, but it's really important because you will run yourself ragged. Set a sustainable workflow. I know when you come into a position, you just got promoted, you just got appointed, it feels really good to get that first win under your belt and impress everyone. And they're like, yay, we're so glad we hired Suzanne. When I was at one library, I started as the director. The website was like Blogger still, and it was brown, and you had to scroll to find any information, and I hated it. So the first weekend I went home and I built a whole new website on WordPress, and it looked so good. And I even got to work on Monday morning, and I got an email from actually my current boss now, but he, when I was still a library, and he's like, did you make a whole new website for the library? It looks great. And I loved it, and it was perfect, and it was worth it. However, that is not a sustainable workflow. There is no way I could have went home every single weekend and like built a website, built this, did that. So that was like a one-time thing to kind of get that first win under my belt and tackle something that I thought was really important. But you can't do that all the time. You still need your time off. You still need your weekends. You still need that time just for you, away from the library. So if you go and you do something like that, don't set that expectation for yourself. Like, well, now I have to do that all the time. Your library hired you, or your boss promoted you for the long-term success of your library. They didn't hire you for 6 awesome weeks of work and then that's it. They want, so spread that out a little bit and set a sustainable workflow. Like, one of the issues I feel like I'm dealing with right now a little bit is if I don't answer an email right away, people they start getting frantic. And I feel like I set that up for myself, because I got to answer this email. I got to answer this, especially during COVID. Like, I got to answer this email. I got to get back to people. And sometimes it's like not super urgent. It's like, can we borrow the button maker? And if I don't respond within 24 hours, it's like, I need the button maker. So if I had set a more sustainable workflow with my email, maybe there wouldn't be this sense of urgency that I feel like I sort of created. So set a sustainable workflow for yourself. And set boundaries. When you go home, you are home. I know as the director, there are times that people will have to contact you outside of work. Like, oh no, I came into the library and our basement's flooded. Like, yes, they have to contact you. But they shouldn't contact you or you shouldn't contact staff. Do you know where the craft scissors went? When people go home, they are home. Do not email people on their off hours. Every email platform has the capability to schedule send emails, schedule send your emails. Even if it's on your mind at that moment at 9:30 at night and you feel bound to type that email, schedule it to send and hit their inbox in the morning, and not 9 o'clock when they sit down. Maybe 9:15, 9:30, 9:45, extend them a little bit of grace to sit down and get settled in the morning before it's your inbox starts filling up. Take your PTO. This is also really important. There are a lot of directors I know, they're like, I just can't take off. If I'm not here, then who? You have to find a way. Your board has to find a way. You need that time to refresh. and you have to take your time away. You will come back to the library a better employee if you have that time away. It also creates a culture where people feel like they can't take off because you're not taking off. So you have to make sure you are taking your PTO, you are entitled to your PTO, you have to take it, you have to figure out a way for coverage. You know, what we do at the library, it is very, very important work, but it is also not like brain surgery. If you take off, it is okay. Like anything that goes wrong during that week can usually be fixed and be undone. So it is okay. You need to take your time, and you need to encourage your staff to take their time, which means telling them, but also modeling taking that time off. There is no glory in a grind that literally grinds you down to dust. And that's really important. Set those boundaries. You know, when you go home, when your staff goes home, they go home, take your time off. Don't work around the clock, you know, because you're not going to be able to enjoy all those successes if you are physically and emotionally and mentally exhausted. You will make mistakes. Okay, I'm checking on time. We are coming into the final slides. I always have a lot of slides. You will make mistakes, and that is totally okay. Again, you're not expected to know everything, and you're not expected to always do the right thing. We are human after all. But when you do make a mistake, own them, apologize for them, learn from them, never, ever, ever cover them up. Like I said, people will always find out, especially now, right? Like there's always an email. Somebody always has receipts, right? Don't try to cover anything up, and never, ever, 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 ever throw your staff under the bus. And, you know, I've seen this happen. Like, you know, if you are the director, the leader, the department head, like own that. Don't be like, well, I don't know what John did over there. No, like be like, you know, it may present a good coaching opportunity for someone on your staff, but don't just throw them under the bus and then just like leave them there to absorb like whatever mistake happened. You know, early on here, when I moved to the system, there was a document that in previous systems where I worked, it was like sort of like a shared document, like everyone saw it, like it was in one system, they would like publish it every year and everyone would get a copy. In this system, the directors preferred that only the directors saw it. I didn't know that. And I sent it out on our listserv when it was ready. And there were so many angry directors at me. And my boss could have been like, oh, well, Suzanne, I can't believe she did that. But he sent out an email to everyone and he said, you know, ultimately, anything that leaves this office is my responsibility. I'm very sorry for this oversight. Like he took it all, which he didn't need to do, but he did the opposite of like throwing me under the bus. Just if mistakes happen, like it's okay. We're all going to learn from them. There's areas of opportunity. There's coaching opportunities, but, you know, don't cover them up. Don't throw someone under the bus, and just apologize. Like an I'm sorry goes such a long way. Get to know your staff. It's really important that you talk to them, especially if you're new. Schedule time to sit down with everybody. When somebody new comes in, or even if you've been there before and you were an internal appointment, it's still, people feel really unsettled. So get to know your staff, sit down and talk to them, schedule that time. Check in with your staff. So maybe you schedule, I used to sit down with my full-timers scheduled once a month, and we would sit down and we would talk, and I would take notes and they would take notes, and I would schedule a follow-up email so we were all on the same page. But then I would also like stop by their desk. How's it going? What can I help with? What do you need? So even outside those monthly check-ins, check in with your staff, and don't wait for them to come to you. Go to them, go to their workspace and say, how's it going? What can I do for you? And make sure your board checks in with you. If you aren't getting an annual evaluation, you need to ask for one. I think it's really important that people get feedback. And I always ask for feedback. And I would do this with my board. And I was supposed to have a 6-month evaluation at the previous library I was at. And they were like, oh, we don't need to do that. I was like, no, we do need to do that. And I made sure I had my 6-month and then my 12-month and then my yearly thereafter. People should be checking in with you too, and you should be sharing all your accomplishments, because a lot of times you do have board members that don't come to the library and they don't know, but it's important that you're also getting timely feedback. If there's something that a board member is really unhappy with, a lot of times you won't find out until it escalates to like the nth degree. So making sure you're having regular check-ins keeps that from happening. It keeps you and the board on the same page. Document everything. I think this is really important. Conversations with staff. Like I said, when I sit down with my staff, I type up a little summary, little bullet points, what we went over, and I email it to them. But anything else that happens in the library, sometimes something small happens and you're like, that won't happen again. But then 3 months later, it does happen again. and then 3 months later, it does happen again. You need to document that, because if it does come to a situation where you need to reach out to HR, you need to reach out to that lawyer, you need to have documentation. If you've ever have to work with unemployment claims, they want so much documentation. Document everything, even if you think it's small, even stuff with the facilities, something happens, like document everything. You need to have that backup down the line. The myth, the bad, and the ugly. Again, like things will happen that you can't control. Documenting things along the way is important, but sometimes those unexpected things will happen. Just know you cannot prepare for everything, right? Like COVID, like who would have known? But be as proactive as possible. So make sure you have a disaster or crisis plan. Make sure you're an active listener when people come to you. If someone comes to you with something that's pretty heavy and you don't have to act immediately, don't. That's when you go to your advisor. That's when you reach out to your HR, your lawyer, and then you try to get that professional advice. Make sure you're always communicating and following up with all appropriate parties. Some stuff may be confidential, but if the staff comes to you with something and you handle it, but they never know, you're going to lose a little bit of trust equity with them. So make sure then you call that person back in and you communicate the information that you are allowed to communicate, so they know you heard them and you acted on it. Don't be afraid to change course. If you make a decision on something and then you get more information, you can't be like, oh, well, I can't change my mind. It looks wishy-washy. No, change course. Like, you have more information now. And I think that's something that we all learned during COVID, right? Like, okay, this is what we're going to do. Then we got more information from the CDC. Okay, now we have to change course, and this is what we're going to do. It is okay to change your mind as long as more information comes into you. And then assess and learn when it's all over. What did we do really well? What did we not do well? And then adjust those disaster crisis plans that you came up with. People will take their cues from you as the director, as the leader. So it's important that everything on that previous slide, that you do that, especially that following up, because that's how other people will act in situations that are not great. Like, they're going to follow your cues. So if you panic and you that's how your staff will act. But if you are calm and measured and you communicate, your staff will also act accordingly. Ease into change. Change is hard for everyone. If you are a new person, they always say, try not to change stuff for 6 months. I think that's really good. Just observe for 6 months, maybe even a year, but a year feels kind of long, but 6 months, ask questions, look at workflows, look at procedures, look at policies, and then slowly implement change, and implement that change with the input of the staff. Follow the library's mission. This is what I always think is really good. Any decisions that you make, if you can back it up with the library's mission statement, then you are on a solid path. So, and if your mission statement isn't great, then get a new one. If you don't have one, adopt one. But following the library's mission of serving the community or whatever it might be, that really will put you on the right path to always doing the right thing. And be open. I hate when people say we've never done it that way. There have been moments where I've caught myself saying things that way, but be open to change, to learning, to ideas, to feedback, to new way of doing things. I mean, the way at my system right now that we have completely restructured our system and the way we do outreach has never been done before. And that's okay. If it doesn't work, we just go back to the old way, we fix it. Especially now, I feel like you could just be like, if something doesn't work, you could be like, oh, COVID. Like, it's kind of like a built-in excuse a little bit, but just be open to trying new things. Sometimes things really surprise you and you're like, that worked out even better than I expected. And even if you tried something 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, we're in a totally different world now. Maybe you can try it again. So just be open to that. To see opportunities, we must be open to all thoughts. And the very last thing, and this I promise is my last slide, develop your own style. When you come into a leadership role, director role, you cannot be the person that was there before you. When I came here and I was hired to be the deputy director, my boss now, that was his position, and I couldn't come in and be Ron. Like, I wasn't going to wear a suit every day. I wasn't going to be how he is. Like, it would have been really inauthentic and I wouldn't be having fun. You can piecemeal certain things that you like. I could really like how they handle that. I really like how that director does that. I really liked how that supervisor did that. But ultimately, you need to develop your own leadership style. And there'll be a learning curve. You may make mistakes. That's okay. But you have to be yourself. It's the only way I feel like you can build relationships with your staff and build that trust and enjoy it and have fun. Because ultimately, I think it can be fun. I think administration is hard, but I think it can be really fun and has its own rewards. But you have to be you, I think, in order to make that happen. And that brings us to the end. So, and we do still have a few minutes, and I'm happy to stay on. And I know it's a lot of slides I have to get through and answer any questions that people have, if there are some.
Great. Thank you so much, Suzanne. This was wonderful. I don't see any questions, but I do have a couple of comments that are pretty great. So our brains are subject to negative bias. Remembering that helps me overcome those negative thoughts. And then Sarah said, thank you for naming that regarding delegating. It's definitely less about control for me and more about feeling bad asking people to do things or assigning tasks.
Yeah, I think I deal with both. There's some things where I'm like, oh, it has to be done this way. And it really does not. Like, it's, like it doesn't, it doesn't have to be done that way. If the end result is the same, what does the matter? It doesn't matter what the process was, but then there is that also like, I feel bad asking someone to do this. I'll just do it myself. And like, that's not reasonable or sustainable, especially when I had pages working in the children's room. Like, they were like there to help me prep crafts. And I'd be like, no, I got it. And I'm cutting up little stars and little bears. And like, that was just so silly. And so I think, whichever it is, for me, it's both. We have to get over that and delegate so we don't just completely grind ourselves down.
Okay, if you have any questions for Suzanne, just go ahead and put those in the chat now. Suzanne, we don't have any questions as of right now, but we have a lot of thank yous and kudos for your presentation. Oh, here's one.
Oh.
How do you recommend managing the imposter syndrome of managing folks who have been in the library longer than you?
Yeah, so that, it's hard because there's a lot of different personalities, especially I think say you're new to the library and somebody's been there 10, 15, 20 years, like that's sometimes a very difficult relationship to navigate. What I found some success with, especially if I was going to make changes, I would do walkthroughs with people and staff. So when I was at the Clifton Springs Library, we had our large print books were on the walls and the shelves went up really high and really low. And then the nonfiction books, which was our least popular collection, was in the middle. It had prime real estate. The shelves were great heights. And I would watch the seniors and older adults and other large print users straining to reach up and go to, and I was like, we need to flip these collections. And there was somebody on staff, it's like, but it's always been this way. And so I said, and I'd walk her through and I would show her what I would see. And, and I would just kind of talk through the whole process. And I was like, okay, it's happening. And then I said, if it doesn't work, we'll flip the collections back. We can always reverse it. But I think when someone's there a long time, there's a lot of different things that go into it. They're territorial. They don't like change. They feel disrupted. Are you going to fire them? There's probably a little bit of imposter syndrome for them too. So I think trying to bring the staff in with you on decisions. And, when I would do a walkthrough of the building, I would bring somebody with me and we would come in the front door, we'd walk through the building and I'd point out the things that I'd see. I asked them what they saw. I just making them part of the process, I think helps people feel less unsettled. Some people are just going to be a little grouchy and there might be nothing you can do about it. But I think if people feel like things are happening with them instead of to them, it really helps ease that a little bit, especially with more tenured staff.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. We are just about at 11. So Lisa, we can go ahead and stop the recording.